Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Plan, the United States becomes a party to the Rome Statute, the International Criminal Court, the advanced credibility, the U.S. immunity intervention under operational FEC preventing prosecution non-member states, only becoming party self-shepherd, for the American policy ICC has no jurisdiction over any non-party states due to its immunity intervention to define core principle of law jurisdiction. The state can invade state party commit atrocity and joint immunity rendering meaningless membership and period displayed in advanced without U.S. objection. Myanmar, a non-party state, all allies of parties obligated to cooperate if U.S. becomes party. ICC advanced values U.S. can influence property place American judges advanced objectives part of the law affairs. Bill subject to broad adoption. That's a death knell. For the ICC period 24 ICC constructing list of member states written immunity indictments of Israel exposed vulnerabilities courts. The numbers to rest flow list don't want to true blow from legislation the same system that fails to give immunity. Central Article 98 which grants the immunity. American debating which shields Netanyahu allies face sanctions which all countries might offer immunity for Putin. Each new indictment immunities from allies running court imposed. They resulted in international pressure as the war in Gaza Hassan 24 ICC warrants add to the barrage of lawsuits international law create incentives to end war, diffuse allegations that Netanyahu's calculated increased pressure makes mistakes that bring his fall result in speedy agreement and war until legal action is taken. All ceasefires failed and shot 117 experts failed Netanyahu resume House levies after the captives were recovered, punished the group budgets. Israel security ensure political survivor. Israel very good at breaking ceasefires, restrain moderate. Israel very good at breaking ceasefires, restrain moderates Israel aggression, assault, entrapment, levy. 23 moderating forces stifled, shifted towards military might neglecting restraint for Biden. That Israel wait for self-destruction rights might to be assertive, refusal to appropriate low demonstration effective pressure, pivotal to champion more demonstration renditions cost escalate assertive America law unlock stable status credible ICC operations incentivize humanitarian objectives. Baker 24 substantial impacts on Netanyahu in assurance of warrants indicating officials must change conduct risk additional charges signify any war must be waged within humanitarian law to limit the impact on civilians and wounded soldiers. That alone resolves escalation prefer official statements. MEM 1 states escalating resistance retaliate for genocide on Gaza 3 kill and shooting Hamas shelters attack response for ongoing crimes. A message to Israel PFLP called for escalating West Bank tensions tied to genocidal war. ICC arrest Netanyahu and Gallant for war crimes. Further escalation draws some great powers. World War III. Ottoman 24 Israel Palestine escalate to Third World War. The U.S. and Russia and China expand influence risk escalate to wider conflict. Proxy war treason superpowers conflict and disrupt oil extremist groups and terrorist attacks beyond trading relations. Diplomacy must be recruited from the proactive engagement with flashpoint for global tensions. Extinction 1 West occur 18 less than 1% of weapons explode debris after mission starvation destroy the ozone. Cause cancers and horrible diseases. Exchange can end civilization ever. And that's what a first strike from the U.S. in a single afternoon. Ukraine defeat coming down flips the risk calculus for nukes. It'll trigger every nuclear risk. Chaucer for the aggressor youth that should deter U.S. from providing Ukraine with missiles if threats lead to defeat of Ukraine. Russia use them to which other states actually become in place. Nukes no longer are to regard as last resort. Countries seek them, and the risk of wars increases exponentially. Only the plans of the clear international signal against quote neo-colonial expansion. Amendment 23 ICC issued an arrest from Putin. ICC designed to hold individuals accountable, critical pillar of rules-based order, despite touting the importance of accountability for Russia. U.S. inclined to recognize jurisdiction of ICC, costs not supporting too high authority for an enterprise embracing neo-colonial warfare. U.S. should cease objections, finally join the ICC, join the Popo leadership. U.S. lack of support Russia's aggression and most serious attacks since collapse of Soviet Union. If ICC's warning regardless of legal warfare may erode a binding minority of potential walk back damage Russia's already done, put up a united front to hold Russia accountable would be aggressors, especially Beijing. Take note would be a much needed interest. The method page. The standard is preventing extinction that way. Death is global, hateful, irreversible, and for value. Moral uncertainty is a risk, right outweighs the risk, wrong, no amount of suffering. Justifies universal non-consensual death. Accidental risk threats are truly universal non-moves to secure reproduction. Number 22 beings universally events of survival like humans necessary to treat universal claims with scrutiny, power to life itself means dangerous. Not include claims to universality, but witness that of all humans' contention to universalizability. Theorists must address non-humanist universality that rise alongside imminent apocalypse. The affirmative allows the emancipatory potential of the International Criminal Court by eliminating selectivity. Reynolds 16 defining the selectivity by the ICC, meaningful transformation between the investigation of crimes committed by the global north and along the continuous years to offer norms that counter contemporary colonial forcible population transfer apartheid crimes against humanity under the Rome Statute provides settlement. The very structure of settler colonialism rendered criminal and settler colonialism intrinsic to Israel policy is essentially prosecuted. This is essential to the negative Palestinian activists. International criminal law has emancipatory potential with the prosecution of colonization. Africans support the ICC. Archibald 24 ordinary Africans support the ICC. Allegation ordinary Africans one of perpetrators accountable. 130 civil society groups from 30 countries rethink their opposition. ICC gain support for human rights in the absence of other solutions. A bullshit ICC represents pragmatic hope for Palestine. Brown 23 shift for where the Palestinian policy will lead towards ICC asymmetrical power will be further eliminated to embrace Israel. Embarrassed Israel could hardly be more freeing to tread carefully before pouring cold water practice when alternatives are ensured like land focus revives colonialism trauma. 15 indigeneity encompasses diverse people that first live in any place of the mouse history. Connectivity said include all of the non-native in any space distinguished between colonizers, slaves, workers, migrants, allows all agents of colonialism. This of course place natives at the top of the hierarchy and insists on claims of natives. Just as origins become key, such focus shift the focus from historical dynamic to distinguishing native from settlers' indigeneity dependent upon ancestry, adding blood to the discourse. There is historical continuity logic of the colonial. This creates Manchuan dualism empty out from the meaning of colonialism and violence, because the world is connected across slave to land. Nature oppressions are maintained to new guys as fiat is inevitable and a valuable heuristic. It occurs whenever we forecast hypothetical actions, highlighting this in favor of insular intellectualism. Abortions any hope of problem solving jargons 2K epistemological debates max of elitism and displacing time for those in struggle. What do we ever say to the oppressed? How does it help solve war? Does it speak to those who comprise policy? No, it supports the policy theory is bad as a position that abrogates any hope, solves realities and millions confront in which, in what sense can debate to word a bottomless pit of epistemology be helpful to anyone other than abstract debate? Settler colonialism theory leads to nationalism, statecraft, and post-colonial racism. Sharma, 20 conflict of nationalism, separate ruling, who nations ruled through sovereignty, imperialism was nationalized for Armenians, Mohawks, Palestinians, and the struggles are of national liberation, territorial sovereignty, and inheritance. Beneficiation, not inheritance, by all immigration controls technologies for nation, making technology sovereign vitality and territories are never physical and national forms and forge a naturalized link between people and place. Post-colonial racism between soil and blood, those excluded for national belonging, reference is contaminating the body politic. Only nationals have the right to enter rights only for citizens. The order normalizes segregation. Nation states demand that we choose sides. Turns all solvency. The perm is best. Sharma, 20 failure. A failure of national form extension decolonization. National natives debilitated by post-colonial melancholy and national sovereignty as a means to decolonize British people will be consigned to the post-colonial power collective project for decolonization possible that can unite through a shared refusal to identify with these categories. People build maroon societies full of creatures. Organized works of the world unite. Each of these struggles was built on solidarity. People shared experiences led to resistance. Good for crossings.
Alright, you good? Yeah. Judge, good. Awesome. Okay, let's start on the immunity interpretation, the first piece of evidence. Can you explain the warrant?
The warrant for what the immunity interpretation
Yeah, actually, yeah. What do you think the U.S. is?
The immunity interpretation is the idea that states who are not party to the International Criminal Court are not able to be prosecuted by the ICC. Becoming party solves by making it clear.
Well, sure. Okay, so that is the United States interpretation. So how does the affirmative resolve that interpretation? Like,
sure. The Sheffer argument talks about how the Sheffer and then later the Vindman evidence talk about how the reason why other states freak out about the reason why other states could have their warfare is that they believe that the U.S.'s immunity interp is the basis for the law. Once you remove the basis for that, those other countries look hypocritical.
Well, why do you remove the basis for it? It seems like the app just means the immunity interpretation doesn't apply to the U.S., but why does the immunity interpretation not apply to the United States?
The immunity interpretation has no basis within the ICC. The argument is that the U.S. has made up the immunity interpretation to shield themselves. By joining, the U.S. no longer has a need to make up the immunity interpretation.
Okay, sure. So then let's talk about Gaza. You talk about the actual evidence. Says pressure ends the war in Gaza. Can you contextualize what is pressure? What does that look like? How does that actually happen?
The way that pressure works is it requires an international idea with all countries going against Israel and Israeli colonialism in Gaza. Our argument is that in the status quo, countries like the U.S. are holding out because they believe in the immunity interpretation. Prosecuting Israel not prosecuting Israel in the ICC in the status quo makes the U.S. feel like it's going to be prosecuted next, while not being a party.
So I guess why does the app isolates Israel? I guess why does that lead to a shift in Israel's action? Obviously Netanyahu's already facing immense pressure. He's not going to get arrested. So what is does the app arrest Netanyahu?
Okay. Two warrants for how it solves. First is that it incentivizes humanitarian objectives. It says that states become, when there's a risk of arrest, it has this quote tangible impact, and then Netanyahu, which is the base reference.
What does that tangible impact look like?
That tangible impact looks like he ends the current war in Gaza. He would probably scale back the amount of type of colonialism he's doing, and that's what?
Why?
Because there's an incredible amount of international.
But he's already faced significant international
pressure. Yes, and the U.S. is the one who's always been backing them.
U.S. backing them may be significant, but everyone else is not sufficient to even slightly influence.
I don't know which countries you're talking about. Can you explain?
Literally every other country, the United States is one of the minor countries that have supported Israel. For example, Italy, France, etc., have all cut their arms transfers to Israel after.
France still supports Israel on the basis of the immunity interpretation, because the argument is that even if they've ended arms transfers, Israel still believes that it's invincible because nobody will stop them.
That's fine. The Russia stuff, how do you resolve that? How do you arrest Putin when he's blatantly disregarded international law in the past?
First, we do not have to actually arrest Putin. We just need to make it clear to Putin that continuing to aggress in Russia, continuing to aggress in Ukraine would be bad. The evidence says that it would prevent Russia's argument that the U.S. is holding it to a double standard, and Russia would realize it could get arrested and knocked down.
Sure. All right. I'll take a little bit of credit. Okay, that's 30 seconds taken.
3, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes?
4.
Okay, so
The order is going to be 2 off case. Order on case is going to be the method and then the advantage.
okay, sounds good. I'll let you know when I get the one.
Yeah, I'll send it.
Let me know when it's done.
Okay, it's sent.
Yeah. Just download it. I'm good.
Okay, are you good?
Wait, sorry. Give me a sec. 2 off, you said? Sorry.
Oh, fuck, I'm going water bottle. Yeah, 2 off.
Hey, I'm ready.
Alright, that's fine. Through the racialist ontological orderings of the settler master native by the West Brand brings about the destruction of the nuclear mountain political sovereignty, settler colonial slavery that are investments in them, the reign history for that refunctioning of all these from those 21. The recent climate change, the slavery, the innovation of peoples, and structured capitals, all of the same global ordering, West Part human teachers, catch upon living human racial, equitarian, and adversity, racial skill, marketing, Indians that lead and deserving death, the create toxic geography, where life is systematically destroyed, for genocide from BGP Iraq to geographic one, life is systematically, life is self-synonymous with death for those who are positioned on the antithesis of humanity, life has normally relied upon the death to give life to itself, and it is the West of the world owes existence to genocide, desire for the Western model of living ensures that the Europeans not only driven by political economy, but also by libido and economy, well, gratuitous violence, creates a political ontology which black and Native American people is not human political ontology that creates the power subjects, black and they'll function as if for metaphysical, ecological terror, and along the continued imprisonment and murders of black and Native people, and see how ontological structures continue into the present, and the alternative is refusal to degenerative practice towards the decolonial futures, and express make way for the after genocide horizon of King 17. Gender refusal, decolonial abolition traditions, making Western thought turn upon itself, and settler colonial knowledge, making the settler colonial meta-narrative object research questions, assumptions, and books was about particularities, meta-narrative refusal, reverse separation enacted by European theory, which uses genocide to annihilate native epistemologies. When the United States has the practice of genocide, self-states exist, and the native people can exist as human, the United States can no longer determine the conditions for being human, studies and black and practicing theory that should determine identity. And our tradition debated that the judgeship value of the act of the object research that must be proven ethical, weighing its hypothetical implementation. They get to weigh the framing of the act, which is the most predictable since all your often assumes validity, while every other strategy relying on doing massive parts of the act, like process counterplans or theory, and this interpretation of settlers been acting with these spaces reproduces colonial subjects reporting as the only real impact of the realm that's 117. Settlers to enter the chart of the daily life predicated on genocide, settlers position on land into sustained defensive posture, decolonization include analysis of the settlers settler colonialism, historic creating cracks in the wholeness pursuit, restoring us to the mythology, reducing the curse of readers, speech acts, repetitive practice of everyday life, like some places of meaning, and every facet of IR and foreign policy is indebted to settler colonialism. Therefore, foundational assumptions are complicit in this structure that the native life and governance is King 17. Colonization, association, and the dispute political communities are foundation of the connection of everything about global has revolved in others as long as settled colonies can prevent conditions for limits for what is possible foreign policy. Relation between indigenous peoples and non-indigenous people continue to be characterized by conflict. Foreign policies which are underwritten by domestic institutions. The IR cast indigenous peoples as permitted sanctions that left other land foreclose the possibility of research of political communities, denies opportunity for indigenous expressions for liberation. The right to continue to reinforce rules of unity instead of political states with Europe as the plan and foreign policy contributes to the research of indigenous political difference through conception as well as physically. And 898 shifts the U.S. from the courts jurisdiction and security council membership to the ICC's political geopolitical interests. Shamsi 16. Intersection of Rome is vulnerable to political pressure. States more powerful states complementarity to the ICC and more less likely to interfere with powerful states and non-ability to care of sufficient investigations costs. Resentment that the 898 the court cannot present for state parties already obligated to third states and ASP forbade the president the government for operating authorizing necessary action to free American soldiers that the U.S. ultimately will shield the jurisdiction. The U.S. argument that the system is willing to persecute can succeed. The Security Council has referred on party states that in Libya the purpose behind the regime change of Security Council could suspend your investigation and require the prosecutors less likely to be vulnerable if gravity is not defined into vague and you can be using consistently. And the use participation of the ICC shareholder economy will only make the courts an expansion of empire that's candle 15. The ICC relies on the annual funding for the member states producing shareholder economy that draws upon material logics and regarding states that serve shareholders austerity at the level of practice that reduce budget is existential threat to the ICC or preoccupation with their private realm. The work of the court to secure its contribution provide us with the contributions of your budget will see this quantity of justice. And the second off, advantage counter plan to the United States should repeal all legislation that countries fail to give arrest immunity for Israeli officials, solves the immunity prediction. It's the legislation page says destroy what says we want to see, and it solves the cases that linking for critics of legitimization of the ICC and the case page. Starting on the method debate proper, first is the Zimmerman evidence. The Zimmer evidence is wrong. It's a responsive argument. It's not that extinction is good. Rather, we've criticized your claims of sovereignty and deployment of magnitude first to prevent nuanced debate about current suffering, but independently Juarez proves that life is predicated upon death in the Euroscene, which means that the value of life claim is problematic because there's always going to be more death in colonialism as a result of attempts to preserve humanity. And the Reynolds evidence, topic link straight term Reynolds because of U.S. cooperation, and Arkenbong 25 evidence. Homogenization of Africa is silly. It's a continent, can't hold regional differences, can't account for exceptions. And the Brown 23 evidence. Brown does not provide international relations such has provided a solution. The Sharma 15 evidence doesn't focus on, we don't focus on land, but on the geographical construction, which is nevertheless important for indigenous subjectivity as part of our evidence, and the majority of evidence adequate planning for epistemology and epistemological empirical understandings of the world to better plan predictive actions for makers and about almost fits into just a simple condition before it gets away case that's valuable and story highlighting the charts zero. Certainly it is right, and probably part of the depths of theoretical imagination, the gauging epistemological and ontological ways to analyze the sociology of our knowledge, and the Sharma evidence is wrong. It's not just we're not shopping for material, the national sovereignty or material accuracy may lead to violence now, but that is because of the political and structure where the United States has always repurposed diplomacy, i.e. the David of courts or the Oslo courts that are always sabotaged by the United States, and the key stage proper starting on the advantage absent the U.S. will start on the line now. Proper Baker and Hassan now are about the status quo, but they say arrest warrants are sufficient, but they exist now. There is no U.S. key warrant. The immunity tradition is wrong. Even if the app joins the United States joins the SEC, there's no reason that's why we get rid of the immunity tradition, especially for other states like Israel, which is intended to protect. And the U.S. immunity, the sanctions magnify the link. No warrant for alignment beyond resolving Gaza war. Fear of ICC doesn't lead to spillover in other international cooperation. And no perception argument. Netanyahu cannot be arrested. No metric to evaluate increased pressure against Israel. No evidence to indicate U.S. helps with arrest warrants in Israel or beyond, because it's not U.S.'s obligation to. It's because the Gaza escalation's woke on nuclear classic debate brain rock. 76 years of empty threats. No reason Russia and China suddenly get involved after a year. Since October 7th, the ICC aggression is not subject to our political ontological claims about the state. Ukraine scenario, we cannot prosecute Russia. They have not read zero evidence about that Ukraine loses now. I'm serious. Scholars of Ukraine terminal does not come close to making the argument. And soft power is definitely linked because it's the capacity for the United States to exert diplomatic influence onto what we get what we want. That link turns Gaza. We use that power to coerce other countries to help our allies and hurt our enemies. Form of Gentile colonialism. MEM is undeniably bad. It's just escalation now. The last line is FY about ICC warrants. It does not say the plan solves. Card quality is zero. The dog cards proper. First is the ICC undermines conflict resolution in every instance by backing leaders into border and occupies the necessary to ensure people stop fighting, resolving on international mediation without the SEC proofs. Proven by Netanyahu ripping up chance after arrest warrants. That's 0.20. Domestic courts are unlikely to prosecute government officials authority by ICC makes the government a determined piece which power is shared, paving the way for arrest. Warrant against any needs perceived that as a matter of state survival, do everything in the main power which are warrant against a gun off yet a similar effect. And the next card. The court is slow politicized and unreliable. It's bigger. 2023, the ICC transparency has been effective. Individuals are uninformed of the mandate trials take place behind closed doors. The public has lacked such information. ICC under criticism for bias leads to suspicion. An investigation has taken years, taken to lead to delays. Conflict is reduced. Crime stuff will continue to limited by its own mandate. Justice has not been delivered. The new analysis report exacerbated views about inconsistent mandate, increasing perception. The U.S. court is biased and politicized. And Russia, I-law can't solve war. That's drill. 24, the Ukraine Gaza demonstrated the weakness of I-law. Warsaw cause or wars of Russia's illegal investigation continue to violate the laws of military legality. I-law legitimacy is balance. ICC guards foreign barely inconvenience Putin, and the arrest warrants have not prevented attacks by it. Israel laws impotent and Russia blatantly violates Stereo 22 that Russia's invasion of Ukraine blatantly violated laws of prohibition on force underlying tenants targeting the civilians for torture, rape, and sexual violence, and Russia ignores ruling. That's Falcon Bridge 24. Moscow dismissed the ICC as a warrant for provocation that had no legal significance. Spokesperson said that they were the warrants only to discredit this. It does not have any force for us and are insignificant. ICC warrants have no impact. Look, the one I see is like relying on the solvency of like saying we're going to increase pressure, but they not contextualize what that pressure looks like. How does U.S. change its foreign policy towards Israel? Not contextualize it. Cannot go into Israel, arrest Netanyahu, because obviously that would be a form of war that Netanyahu would do anything to resist, given the fact that he's responded the same way to every other country. Russia is a similar instance. Russia is already isolated now. It doesn't have anything to care about with the United States saying, "Oh, you committed a war crime." Like obviously, Russia knows that it's not going to get any support from the U.S.
Okay, context?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with Henderson evidence. It says that speaking of something repeatedly can change our minds. If it is true that the entirety of the state is structured through like an ontological way, that we are like libidinally structured against indigenous people, why can us talking in debate overcome that, and why does that not mean people in Congress talking can just like overcome like their issues?
Yeah, so Henderson clarifies the way that the political ontology is coded is through these new spaces. They can be interrupted through constant recognition, repetitive and iterative breaks through that thing. We're making a political ontological claim about the way the state operates, not necessarily an ontological claim about individual beings that is like entirely like incapable of changing.
Okay, wait. So check on the method page. What was the argument you made before? What was the argument you made on the Brown card?
The which one? The Brown card. Brown does not prove international relations has provided a solution to any of the conflicts. It just says that it's a strategy that we can use.
Okay. Sure. The alternative also has not provided solutions in the past. Is it not just also a strategy?
I'm confused by your question.
So you made a claim that the international relations is only a strategy and it hasn't worked in the past. Alternative also has never been done in the past. It's also just a strategy. Why does this not link equally?
The Henderson evidence demonstrates solvency for the alternative. We recreate and sort of reform so that.
Okay, yes, and that our app has also demonstrated solvency for the affirmative. I'm confused.
Well, we've criticized that solvency.
Why?
Like all the
wait,
links,
okay,
like case arguments.
On the links, can you explain the A98 link?
The A98 link? You mean the
whatever the
16 card? two warrants. The first, the A98 means that the court cannot proceed to sort of, so basically when a country joins Rome, their A98 means that the obligations imposed by the ICC cannot conflict with those already accepted to third-party states by a nation. So say, for example, the United States already has obligations not to arrest Netanyahu because it has like diplomatic relationships, treaties, etc., signed with Israel as an example of that. The ICC cannot overcome A98 because it is written inside the ICC. The second argument in Shamsi gives an example of how the court has been used for political capture. For example, the United States.
So that makes sense. On the
yeah,
method page,
like,
you said value to life negative. Does it
is
justify
often
death
for
good?
the regime change. What?
You said value to life negative on the page. Is death good?
Our argument is not necessarily that death good. Our argument is that before we can address questions of extinction first, we have to resolve sort of contingent, like sort of forms of suffering that are related to political ontology. It is that our argument is that in the world, in the current world, given the Eurocene, the kinds of deployment of like existential risks is always used as a way to kind of preserve the global ordering of the North. Because that global ordering is always used to sort of, for example, in this way, I'm sure the one who's going to make an argument about extinction outweighs the critique, which is going to be like, which demonstrates literally that extinction is always going to be used rhetorically and like to
Can you
outweigh
explain this
discussions
Jarvis
of
rehighlighting?
genocide. What?
Can you explain this rehighlighting of the Jarvis?
Yeah, Jarvis concedes it's uniquely important to engage in epistemological, ontological debates. That's a warrant for why we should also consider issues like K framework,
Okay.
which
sure.
are only permitted by our model.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll take credit. Wait, did you read Kindle?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the straight turn argument after the value to life argument?
Oh, the Reynolds argument is just a question of the link debate.
Okay. Okay, 110 remaining, tending the dog. Okay, let me know whenever you guys get it.
Yeah. Order, sorry.
The order is case, which is the order of the advantage, the method page, the counter plan, and then the critique.
Say that again?
Case in the order of the advantage, the method page, the counter
Yeah.
plan, the critique.
Gotcha. Okay. Alright, yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Drop the terminal impact with Russia and Ukraine. Both Russia and escalation goes nuclear, which is dropped now. They say makers about the status quo. It's not, the evidence says we need a credible ICC, which is not now, which will be explained later. Lower on policy, they see no reason to plan moves to immunity interpretation. The reason why we have interpretation is to avoid prosecution. Joining means there's no reason because we do not need to name immunity interpretation. They say no spillover. Yes, the U.S. lone holdout is also the primary support of Israel, and Ukraine, and also the evidence about Vindman says that we are the ones who Russia views as hypocritical. They say no metric for like de-escalation. Obviously, we read evidence specific to Gaza and Ukraine. Well, they just asserted this. They say 76 years. The U.S. has held out in all those years, which is irrelevant. They say soft power is a link. It's irrelevant. Which is irrelevant because we have not increased soft power. Argument is we should deter Gaza. We should deter Israel and Russia in the context of the AF, not broadly. They say no emphasis on escalation. All it does, especially the ones that say the Ottoman evidence that says it's escalating now. They say ICC and also the risk is increasing for you. They say ICC undermines conflict. It's about the past. We read specific evidence now about how Israel and Ukraine, Israel and Russia are uniquely escalating now and will be scared of the plan using forced backlash. They say it's slow, perception solves. Conceded the humanitarian incentives would immediately end the war in Gaza because everyone would freak out, cause war. They say Allah can't solve. Our evidence is highly specific to Russia, which is explained above. They say here. They say Russia violates. It's about the status quo. Russia violates now because says no because it believes that the U.S. doesn't care, but because it believes the U.S. doesn't care. Hypocrisy. They say Russia ignores also the status quo. Answered above. They say they would do anything to continue war, but our argument is that the ones that say stakes become too high, then they would have to back down because there's no risk. Plus, they have like no offense on the policy stuff. Now go to the method page. They say Zimmer allows for critiques. No, you would still get critiques under our interpretation, which will explain later. They say value of life is negative. Our argument is just that the world can always get worse, even if it cannot get better, which will be explained later on ontology. They say they straight turn it. Also explained on the K. They say Africa is that we have homogenized Africa because we say Africans care about the plan. Wrong. Our argument is just that Africans are being colonized now and they are being hurt by violent leaders. So it's good to solve them. We have not homogenized them because we've read evidence from countless activists. They say our evidence is not a solution. Our evidence only the ILA has not provided solutions in the past. The alternative is only hypothetical in the same way, and we've read evidence that says Palestinian people believe it's a necessary solution, which means that it's necessary now. They basically dropped a 3-card dissent to their alternative and their theory. The Sharma evidence says the view instead of colonialism through the logic of blood quantum and who is indigenous is bad because it recreates ideas of who should be allowed to have land and what sovereignty is that causes violence. And most colonial racism is people are viewed as not important as who should actually have the land, and that causes more violence and turns your alternative because it also turns ontology because there's no explanation of what a native person is. They say Sharma is violence now and wrong. It's about wrong. The evidence is the decolonization, refusal, etc. Other things that trigger it. Now go to the counterplan. Look, I just didn't read any of the cards about the sanctions, and they also have not read a rehighlighting, so there's no explanation. Do both. Do the counterplan cancel the immediate interest, which is the necessary internal link. These laws, but Israel uses to continue its aggression because we do not actually overturn it. They say it's also per conflict ontology because they say the state is always bad. That justifies severance because if they get taken out of the rest, we get to two. They cancel Russia. They cancel Russia because there's just no explanation of it because we're not sanctioning ICC over Russia. Go to the critique. Framework where the Africans unique when still lands beyond implications of unpredictable shifting. The burden of majority creates a predictable balance that like the heartbeat minimizing fairness how waste wants all to not can neutralize. The alternative making remedy at first by for refusing to put understand for unprepared for unpredictable one sees always on proximity to paradox and the impact of equal access to the balance amount of them go down right here because they response to paradox place they require fitness to be evaluated. The Henderson doesn't assume debate and double down because even if debate smooth representation of states with the representation that exists outside debate, we have the incentive to try to prove you wrong because we want to win the debate, which means we'll just double down on our arguments. Weighing framing is not predictable because you can win on for one of many things, critique a single word and turn it into the entire entity. Only our interpret resolves because they can still read critiques when they have to prove that the plan is a bad idea. It's also linear. If the theory checks wrong, it's theory and consequence. It's linear and also consequences by deficit theory is wrong. Extinction outweighs it's only a future truly future event. And the links are all wrong, which is explained earlier because Russia and Israel are engaging in new colonial warfare now. All that links are the plan. These don't prove that plan is actually a bad idea. Also, permutation to both double bind, they all overcome things we can't overcome the status quo. All the links are about the plan now, but we overcome it because root cell activity by switch colonialism in Africa, and also extinction outweighs, which is explained on the case because it's truly universal. It kills everyone.
3:30, starting now.
Okay.
The order is the counter plan, the K, the case page.
What order is the case page?
The method and then the advantage.
Okay.
Counterplan case.
Yeah. Or counterplan K case. Yes.
Three case. Cool. Good.
Okay. Kicking the counterplan, maybe the perf-con argument will make two responses. One, it definitely links less to the affirmative because we'll make arguments as to why the 1AC actively makes the ICC more strong, which is significantly worse in terms of the consequences of the plan. And two, they introduce these arguments into debate, which means they are definitely linking harder into the critique in terms of the actual investment they have into these arguments, which means, and which would be sufficient given the fact that they have not contextualized the perf-con into outweighing into a link term or anything that relates to the link term. They've done no weighing in the 1A, don't let 2A arguments because we can't respond to them. The critique page proper, go to the framework page. This at the top. This is a debate about debate. Anti-blackness and colonialism are epistemic products that are furthered in this round in ways beyond the plan of the confines of research to be extended beyond them to consider the larger unconscious assumptions that undergird the solvency of the plan that fiat relies on. Otherwise, fundamental questions go unanswered. For example, is liberalism just? Is international relations something we should try to work with? Then your ballot is decided by who shapes more ethical subjectivities in response to the political climate of the Euroscene. Now, the lemma line proper, the first argument, question of solvency. They've dropped Henderson. Colonialism functions through the iteration of smooth spaces in which settler subjects unconsciously relay colonial subjects and assumptions, making them appear as common sense. These patterns can only be broken by questioning the performance of the 1AC to reinvent more ethical subjects. That will be the basis for our solvency claim and the alternative later. But third, the second question, fairness isn't bad. We don't hack against us, but rather the content of debates should be preserved rather than just a blanket focus on fairness. If we win, their model, it forecloses the possibility of questioning large assumptions, and even if we are marginally unfair, then you should not vote for them. We are fair and predictable. Every card in the AC was cut with the assumption that their policy-making impact calculus was good, which means you know you have to debate your scholarship, which is exactly why they read half the app was method card preamps. The third argument, competitive nature is a reason why you should engage and lose more to the case. Some people can learn. That's the warrant in Henderson. You don't have to read apps like this one. Regardless, your unwillingness to change doesn't disprove that you did something bad in this round. No single word links. You can make arguments why that kind of a political strategy is rhetorically bad and make offensive arguments regardless. You can make answers to critiques. Process counterplans check the same way you can make responses to the K. And all the implication is they don't get access to weighing the affirmative plan, which was exactly what our interpretation was in the 1C. Because the conversion outweighs on portability, that should be excessively damning for them. We have mitigated their fairness offense and proven that subject reduction is the only sort of constitutive, only terminal impact to this debate outside of the round. The permutation question is the only thing relevant in this debate left. One, links or disades. We'll extend them now. They've conceded both of them, so it should be easy to extend Chomsky. The two implications. One is that A98 loopholes mean the court doesn't have jurisdiction where existing domestic agreements conflict. That means the U.S. is shielded from ICC given American treaties like commitments towards Israel or the Hague Invasion Act, which zeroes affirmative solvency because that just means the plan can't actually solve. And also, it bolsters the U.S. commitment within the court, incentivizes it to use the Security Council membership to refer hostile actors in the global south, which is exactly what they did in Libya to do things like support a regime change against Gaddafi. Even if, and independently, the Kendall argument was also conceded, it means that when the United States gives the ICC significant financial support, it is able to more capably redirect the activities of the court. That was Lynbrook, which means the ICC becomes a tool of political capture. If we win ontology, that means all the incentive structures of the United States are reflected onto the court, and it becomes a way for the United States to expand its power. That's the Juarez evidence. The political actually will do that after the rest of the perms, but the links are definitely this side to make the after the court actively worse. It's not just linked to the status quo, because all the arguments are about why the United States specifically being a member would be bad, but two, the perm whole is terrible. A, it's infinitely aggressive, it justifies doing infinite things, would say, oh, well, we'll do this, and then, and then refuse. Obviously, the as action is bad, which means it's incoherent, and B, it will always win because they assume that, alternate, this doesn't make sense because it's not contextualized. The alt isn't like a fiated action, so there's not something to do. We have rejected explicit your affirmative. Also, the alternative is a form of solvency because we reject the affirmative. Our argument here is that you should redirect subjectivity by rejecting the affirmative and opening discussions about this debate by endorsing things like framework. And because the affirmative is not something problematic as a reason to reject vote negative, that is what the refusal of the 1AC means. It is uniqueness. It is wrong to be uniquely introduced by the 1AC in this debate. Now the Juarez evidence, the political ontology, the role is structured through political and the middle investments in the Euroscene, which black native life is marked through antagonism to Western human desire to civilize the broader world reliance on of lack of labor and devoid of indigenous people drives agents and broader decision-making as the only reliable explanation for centuries of continuous graphic discussions of land gratuitous violence towards indigenous people and black children and libidinal events into the propagation nature. They did not answer that at all, which means it frames the link. The act can be out, the act joined, the United States joined the international agreement, but it cannot be out how the United States will act within those agreements, proven by the link debate proper. Now the case page. We'll start on the method debate. The question of value to life. They make violence worse, and they make violence worse given by the links, which means that value to life isn't even a question in this debate. But even if they've conceded that under the the second, the Palestinian will is not homogenous. Third, nowhere in the 1 and C is their blood quantum reference. This is not our 1 and C. We're not Patrick Wolf. The advantage. We also don't have to determine who is indigenous. Obviously, the state has ways to codify who those people are. For example, things on living on reservations, the physical things in terms of identification within the state. This is not a problem. It is a minutia detail that is a settlement to innocence. What is obvious is that you in this debate have done something problematic, which is resolved by the K page. The advantage. We'll zero it right now. They have not explained what the obligation looks like with the affirmative. Impunity interpretation remains. They have not made an argument for the impunity interpretation getting resolved as a result of the affirmative. Maybe the United States would follow the ICC's obligations itself, but that does not mean the United States would not continue to apply the impunity interpretation to its allies. For example, Israel. There's no context of what the United States would specifically do to change Israel's actions, which means you should definitely not vote for this argument because it has not been explained. Two, no escalation in Gaza. They have gut check evidence. It's just about martial conflict of conflict between Hamas and Israel. There's no warrants for draw-in anywhere. Third, humanitarian incentives. Those incentives exist now. They have not explained how they would, because of many other people are members of the court, they have not explained how those incentives would change as a result of the United States. And 898 turns this for no Russia. The United States, they concede they have blatant disregard for international law. They say Russia just doesn't listen because it thinks we don't care. What does that mean? The United States literally aided the persecution. Russia knows the United States does not like it or approve it, or in Ukraine, going back, the United States is supporting against it. There's no reason as why Putin would change just because the United States signed a treaty. The United States has very limited resiliency. Even if you don't want to value framework, we definitely outweigh because the links mean that the links cause worse consequences than, the links turn the advantages.
Okay. Okay, the order is case, and the order is the advantage, the method page, the counter plan.
I'm good.
Advantage, method, counterpoint, okay. Give me a second.
Okay.
The tuner in the case was solely defensive. If we win framework later, then there's only risk the F solves. They say immunity continues. They dropped it. The reason why the immunity interp exists now is because the U.S. is here being prosecuted. The plan solves because the U.S. did not have a justification for continuing the immunity interp. Their answer is that they would still prosecute Israel. That doesn't matter. Because we're only going for the Russia scenario. They see no reason why Russia cares because they're prosecuting now. Our evidence is the reason that Russia doesn't follow now. And now is because the court is not credible. The plan also restores court credibility because the U.S. follows on, which is a key internal link. Plus, any risk it's also sets a key internal signal drop because nuclear war causes future and drop extinction outweighs from the 1AC, which means that any risk of it outweighs. They must win link translation with a base. Go to the method page. They functionally dropped a 3-card dispatch to the critique, which will lead, so I'll just extend it a bit. They've conceded that the alternative to refuse settler society requires nationalism because it requires determining who indigenous people are. Their idea of using the idea of the government using registries is our argument about how it reunifies it causes war. They seek just a settler move to innocence. Our argument is that post-alternative, that the way we think about the post-alternative, war will happen anyway. The tuner says that the alternative is just refusing the act, but refusing the act, if that is true, they cannot solve for any of settler colonialism brought party, which means they cannot go for this. Now the counter. Extend the perf con also extend the perf con really quickly. Their only answer is that they link less to the we link less to is that they link less to the perf con. Our argument is that if refs are not something that you must absolutely be tied to, then we should be allowed to sever our representations. It justifies permutation to the alternative because there is no reason why we are the only ones who should be held to them. Even if they link less, they were also racist because they said that we should follow government to take action. They have read Wara's evidence that says that the government is always bad, which means they link equally. They've not explained the link differential, which is into our rant about how we are more racist. They've not explain that since they've not read link defense to this link, which means it's really easy there. Now go to the K proper. Look, fairness is basically dropped because they drop ballot solvency. The only thing your ballot can drop is fairness. Their arguments are all about exploitability and broader subject formation, but they've conceded that when you vote it does not actually actualize any part. It does not actually actualize any part of refusal in the real world. Refusal in the real world. Remember, they've conceded the argument that they conceded the double down argument in debate. When debaters lose, they will more likely to update their blocks because you will just be convinced that Henderson was wrong or he made technical flows, which is an explicit answer to Henderson, which was dropped by the 2NR, which means that they do not have explicit offense. They've dropped the fairness paradox. Every argument concedes the validity of fairness because it is the validity of fairness. Because it requires the argument to be fairly evaluated. They agree that fairness matters, and we have one defense subjectivity because we will never actually change because we will double down on their positions. The links to the plan might exist, but they are certainly small. We have one link turn that says that Russia is engaging in quote neo-colonial warfare in Ukraine. They've dropped that scenario as at 100%, which means about that. The link turns case arguments are all zero. The link turns case arguments are all zero, and they've not outweighed the app because we have an extinction impact, and they do not have a terminal extinction impact to any of those things. That justifies permutation do both double bind because even if the things are small, bad, they are still even if the app is a bad idea because the link is certainly small. It's really small. They just say it's bad because you can say this everything. That's why the critique is bad because it's unfair. They say mooting inevitable. That is wrong because mooting inevitable. They drop the argument that it's uniquely bad for critiques because critiques can isolate one part of the K and one part of the app, a single word, and there's millions of words in the app. So we always lose.
Can I get docs for the case things?
For what?
The case arguments.
Oh, yeah. Like, do you want me to just resend the one and see?
Oh, if it's like a small block, that's good.
Wait, you mean like when we send like?
That's fine. Actually, I'll just look at the ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was no